Hey guys, welcome back to Wheel Power Garage. Today we're working on a 2018 Honda Pilot and I'm going to show you how to replace the rear pads and rotors. Stay tuned. Okay guys, one quick thing I wanted to show you. If you watch any of my other videos, I'm sure you've heard me say this before, but I always recommend replacing the rotors when you replace the pads. This is a good reason why right here. So if you look at the outside, actually this one looks pretty bad as well, but generally when you look on the outside, the rotor looks okay. But you can see here, here's a small portion of the rotor where the pad is riding on rust. The rust acts like an insulator, can't carry the heat into the rotor, which is what helps slow the car down. The friction is what does this, and you get poor braking performance. A lot of times the outer portion of the rotor will look fine, and the inner portion looks terrible. So as you can see here, I've got the same thing on both sides. It's always a good idea to replace the rotors. Not many places now resurface them. If you can find one, great, get them resurfaced, but you don't want to just throw new pads on old rotors. All right guys, so at the rear of the car now, as with any brake job, and if you've seen my repair video on how to replace the front brakes on a Honda Pilot, you know the first step is to remove the wheel so we can get to the brakes. So let's do that first. Okay, so on a Honda Pilot, this integrates the emergency brake into the center hub of this rotor. So there are no electronic brakes or any kind of integrated brake, no integrated e-brake onto the caliper. So just like you would on a front set of calipers, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize my pry bar and I'm going to retract this caliper. So with a pry bar, you can get in through the opening on the caliper and completely compress that piston with the pry bar. Saves you a lot of trouble then to have to do this when it's out or off of the bracket using a C-clamp or a clamp or anything. This is much, much easier, much, much faster. So now that that is compressed, we're going to take the 12mm socket and we're going to remove the caliper from the caliper bracket. There's 2 bolts on this. Make sure you put the caliper in a way that no weight is hanging on the hose itself. Hang it up if you have to. Like I'm doing right now, I'm just placing on top of the upper control arm just to get it out of the way and make sure I don't damage this brake hose. All right, I can now remove the pads. Hold on to these because you can reference these pads to where the brake sensor is, and that way you put the right pad with the right sensor on the right side of the vehicle, because they are different left to right. Sometimes the inner and the outer pad is different as well, so it's a good idea to hold on to these, do one side at a time so you can put it back on exactly the same. So now we're after these 2 bolts here, and these 2 are 17mm. And it is what holds the caliper bracket to this rear knuckle. All right, now I'll bring you guys back out to the rotor. The rotor is held on with 1 Phillips screw. So you need to remove that in order to get the rotor off of the hub. From there I should be able to just wiggle this rotor off. Be careful because those inner brake shoes for the e-brake are in there. One other thing, remove the adjuster for the rear emergency brake from the old rotor to put onto the new one. Okay, new rotor. as you can see on the camera, there's a little bit of an oil coating on here. So before you go to install this, it's a good idea to take some brake clean rag, spray the surface where the brake pads are going to be, and on this also where the e-brake pads are going to be, or shoes I should say, to get that oil off. That oil is there just for shipping purposes so these don't rust up. So this is the threaded hole where that retaining screw goes. Make sure the tapered hole here lines up with it. Now I can clean this side. Get that oil off of the outside of the rotor. Little anti-seize on that bolt. And this does not need to be tightened very, very tight. It's just there to hold the rotor from moving when the wheel is off. It's not really holding anything past that. The rim is what's going to be holding everything sandwiched well together. All right, next thing is we're going to remove the caliper slides, or the clips here. When you remove them, make sure you take a wire brush to this. Clean these surfaces off before you reinstall them. Now these go in very simply. Just line them up in here, snap them into place. Just like that. Now we can reinstall this onto that rear knuckle. Okay, once these are run down, these bolts get torqued down to 65 foot-pounds. I like to put a little lubricant where this is going to ride against the caliper piston. I also installed the squealer for back here, referencing the old pad, so I knew it went on this side. They go in very simply, just into the slides here. Same with the outer pad, a little lubricant where it rides against the caliper. And now the tricky part with these is they utilize these little springs that help push the pads away from the rotor when you release the brake pedal. They're also known as anti-rattle brackets or springs. But because I retracted that piston all the way, it makes installing this much, much easier from here. But now I can guide my caliper back where it needs to go and run down my 2 caliper mounting bolts. One thing I didn't mention is it's a good idea to inspect the 2 caliper slides. Make sure there is grease in these. You could slide the pin out. Just be careful of the boot. You don't want to tear the boot so moisture gets in there. Usually with one finger you can hold the boot, slide the pin out to inspect it. If it does need any kind of lubricant, just mild grease works really well for that. But just make sure they're well lubricated. Okay, now we can torque down the caliper bolts. These both get torqued down to 25 foot-pounds. One final thing I like to do, a little anti-seize on the center hub. This keeps the aluminum rim from getting stuck onto the hub, and it makes getting that wheel off very difficult, especially if you have to try to change a flat tire on the side of the road. You'll thank me later. So a little bit of anti-seize on the studs keeps those guys from galling up. Finally, put our wheel back on. All right, guys, I hope you liked today's video. As you can see, replacing the rear brakes, pads, and rotors on your Honda Pilot is very, very easy. As always, if you have any questions or didn't catch the torque specifications that I described as I was doing it, I'll put them in the description below. If you found this video helpful, please feel free, send me a super thanks. They're much, much appreciated. Helps me make these videos and keep this stuff going. But that's it for today's video, guys. Again, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Bye, guys.